Feel the ground under your feet right now. There's probably a soul between you and it. Rubber, foam, a layer of engineered cushioning designed to protect you from the world. Take it away, and the idea of walking even a single mile feels absurd. The gravel, the heat, the cold, the sharp little stones that find the soft middle of your foot. Now picture doing 20 miles like that. Before breakfast. Across rock, through thorn, over ground that bakes by noon and bites by dawn. Not as a stunt. As a Tuesday. For roughly 300,000 years, that was simply how a human got from one place to another. Your ancestors did it barefoot, day after day for their entire lives, and most of them never once thought of it as remarkable. They didn't have arch support. They didn't have orthotics. They didn't have a single one of the things you've been told your feet cannot function without. And here's the part that should bother you. Right now, in a world of cushioned shoes and smooth floors, somewhere around 1 in 5 adults will deal with plantar fasciitis at some point. A huge share of people have flat or collapsing arches. Many of us can't walk a mile on hard ground without something starting to ache. So which version of the human foot is broken? Theirs or yours? By the end of this, I promise you'll look at your own feet and at the shoes sitting by your door completely differently. Because the story of how an ancient human walked 20 miles without shoes is not really a story about toughness. It's a story about what your foot actually is, and about what we quietly did to it. Let's start with the foot itself. You have 26 bones in each foot, 33 joints, more than 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments packed into something the size of your hand. A quarter of all the bones in your entire body live below your ankles. That is not the design of a passive platform you stand on. That is the design of an instrument. Your ancestors used the whole instrument. When a foot spends its life unwrapped, walking on real ground, the skin on the sole thickens into something remarkable. Not into a numb slab the way you might expect. Into a tough, flexible callus that protects without deadening. Researchers who study habitually barefoot people have found that these natural soles can be a quarter of an inch thick, hard enough to cross gravel, and yet the people wearing them still feel the ground beneath. They can sense texture, temperature, slope. They get protection and information at the same time. A shoe gives you the first and steals the second. We've actually known this for a very long time. Back in 1905, a physician named Phil Hoffmann did something simple and brilliant. He gathered photographs and casts of feet from people who had never worn shoes, alongside feet from habitually shod populations. The barefoot feet were wider at the front, with toes that spread out like a hand. Strong. Splayed. The shod feet were narrower, the toes pressed together. Sometimes curled, as if the foot had been slowly poured into the shape of its container. He published this more than a century ago. We mostly ignored it. Decades later, a researcher named Kristiaan D'Août picked the question back up. He compared the feet of people in India who had grown up largely barefoot against the feet of Western adults who had worn shoes their whole lives. Same finding. The habitually barefoot foot was a different shape entirely, wider, more even, the toes doing their job. A foot that had been allowed to become what a foot becomes when you simply let it. So your ancestors' feet weren't tougher because they were a different species. They were the same feet you have. They were just never put in a cast. And if all of this sounds like something locked safely in the distant past, it isn't. There are people doing it right now. In northern Tanzania live the Hadza, one of the last groups on Earth who still feed themselves the way humans did for most of our history, by hunting and gathering on foot. An anthropologist named Herman Pontzer spent years measuring how their bodies actually work. What he found is that the Hadza walk astonishing distances every single day, just to eat. The men range out after game and honey. The women cover miles digging tubers and gathering berries, often with a child on their back. They are not training for anything. They are simply living, and living means walking far every day on feet that touch the ground. Then there are the Rarámuri, sometimes called the Tarahumara, who live in the deep canyons of northern Mexico. Their very name is often translated as something close to those who run fast, or the running people, and they earn it. They run distances that would land most of us in a hospital, across brutal mountain terrain, sometimes through an entire night, in a traditional ball running game that can stretch for 50 miles or more. They don't do it in cushioned shoes. They do it in thin sandals called huarachis, often cut from worn-out tires or a scrap of leather, lashed to the foot with cord, barely more than a sole between skin and stone. Look at what that tells you. A foot that runs for its whole life on the ground, in almost nothing, does not fall apart. It becomes the thing your ancestors had. The Hadza and the Rarámuri are not relics. They are living proof that the body in this story is still the body you're sitting in. Now, the soles and the toes explain how they survived the ground, but they don't yet explain the distance. 20 miles is not about skin, it's about energy. Walk far enough on a flat, unforgiving surface, and the thing that fails isn't the bottom of your foot. It's the spring inside it. And here's where the human foot does something genuinely strange. Look at the inside edge of your foot. That curve, the arch, is not decoration. In 1987, a biomechanics researcher named Robert Kerr measured what that arch actually does when you move. He found that with each step, the arch flattens slightly under your weight, stretching the band of tissue running along the bottom of your foot. That band is called the plantar fascia. Think of it as a thick rubber band stretched from your heel to the base of your toes. When the arch flattens, that band loads up with energy, the way a bow loads when you draw it. Then, as you push off, the arch springs back and flings that energy forward. Kerr estimated that this spring returns around 70% of the energy of each step. Your foot is, quite literally, recycling your own motion. Every stride you take on a healthy arch, the foot is handing some of the work back to you, for free. Over 1 mile, that's a gift. Over 20, it's the difference between possible and impossible. This is the engine your ancestors walked on. A self-renewing spring, wrapped in a self-thickening sole, attached to toes that gripped and spread and read the ground like fingers. They didn't endure 20 miles in spite of having bare feet. They covered 20 miles because of what bare feet, used constantly, became. That's Act 1. The foot is not a flat board. It's a tuned machine, and theirs was fully assembled. Now let's go a layer deeper into the science that reframes the whole thing. Because if the foot is a machine built for distance, the obvious question is, built by what? What kind of life carves a spring into a primate's foot and thickens the sole and reshapes the whole lower limb around going far? The answer came from a paper that changed how scientists see our entire body. In 2004, 2 researchers, Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lieberman, published a study in the journal Nature with a quiet, enormous title: Endurance Running and the Evolution of the Genus Homo. Their argument was this: we are not built for speed. Any decent dog outruns you. A deer would leave you standing. By the measure of a sprint, the human body is a joke. But almost nothing on Earth can do what you can do, which is keep going. Bramble and Lieberman walked through the body part by part and found feature after feature that makes no sense for sitting or for sprinting, but perfect sense for covering long distances on foot. The arch, that energy-returning spring we just talked about. A huge tendon at the back of the heel, the Achilles, found in running animals and absent in our closest ape relatives. A large muscle in the buttocks that barely fires when you walk, but switches on hard when you run, stabilizing your trunk over each leg. Even the way your head is balanced, with a small ligament at the back of the neck that keeps your gaze steady while everything else is bouncing. None of that is for standing around. All of it is for moving for a long time, without stopping. And it costs you almost nothing. This is the part that's easy to miss. Going far is only useful if going far is cheap, and for a human, walking is astonishingly cheap. In 2007, a team of researchers including David Raichlen and Herman Pontzer did something clever. They measured exactly how much energy it takes a chimpanzee to move and compared it to a walking human. A chimp knuckle walking or shuffling upright burns energy fast. It's a costly, awkward way to travel. A human walking upright on those long legs and springy feet uses only a fraction of that. By their measurements, human walking is several times more efficient than chimpanzee movement. We are, pound for pound, one of the most fuel-efficient walkers in the animal kingdom. Sit with what that combination means. A body that wants to go far, and a body for which going far barely costs anything. That is not an accident, and it is not two separate facts. It is one design, repeated from your hips to your heels. The arch that returns your energy is the same logic as the long legs that swing like pendulums, and the upright posture that carries your weight straight down through the bone. Cheap motion, over enormous distance. 20 miles on the right body is not an ordeal. It's just a long, quiet, efficient day. And the foot, bare and unwrapped, sits at the very bottom of that whole system. It's the contact point, the place where the spring meets the ground. Then, in 2010, Lieberman published a second study that made the role of the shoe suddenly impossible to ignore. He looked at how people actually strike the ground when they run, comparing habitually barefoot runners with people who'd grown up in cushioned shoes. The difference was stark. People in modern running shoes tend to land hard on the heel, slamming a spike of force up through the leg with every step. Barefoot runners, on the whole, don't. They land on the middle or front of the foot, letting that arch and that calf absorb the blow gently, the way a spring is supposed to. Think about what that means. Take the cushioning away, and your body instantly stops slamming its heel into the earth. The padding didn't protect you from the impact. The padding is what let you create the impact in the first place. Strip it off, and the foot quietly remembers how to land soft. Here I want to be honest with you because this is exactly the kind of topic that gets oversold. In the years after these studies came out, there was a barefoot running boom. Books, minimalist shoes, people throwing out their sneakers and sprinting on pavement overnight. And a lot of them got hurt. So let me separate what's debated from what isn't. What is genuinely debated is whether going barefoot or switching to minimal shoes is better for everyone, right now as adults. The evidence there is mixed. A foot that spent 40 years in a supportive shoe has muscles that have gone quiet and tissues that have shortened. You cannot undo decades in a weekend, and people who try often injure themselves. That caution is real, and anyone telling you to just throw your shoes away tomorrow is selling something. What is not in dispute is the deeper claim. The human foot, allowed to develop naturally and used over a lifetime, is an extraordinary structure for traveling long distances. The arch stores and returns energy. The barefoot foot is wider and stronger. Our whole skeleton, from the heel to the neck, carries the fingerprints of a creature built to move far. These aren't fringe ideas. They sit at the center of how we understand the evolution of our own bodies. So your ancestors weren't superhuman. They were just never separated from the thing their body was built around, the ground. And now we know roughly when the separation began. A researcher named Erik Trinkaus studied something almost no one would think to look at: the little toe bones of ancient humans. He noticed that for most of human history, those small toe bones were robust, thick, clearly used. Then, somewhere around 40,000 years ago, in certain populations, those bones suddenly start getting more slender, weaker. The toes were doing less work. His conclusion was that this is roughly when sturdy footwear became common. Something was now taking the load that the toes used to carry. 40,000 years sounds ancient, but hold it against 300,000 years of being human, and against millions of years of walking upright before that. For almost the entire story of our kind, there was nothing between a human foot and the earth. The shoe is not the natural state. The shoe is the new thing. That's Act 2. The foot is a spring at the bottom of a body designed to go the distance, and the shoe is a recent visitor that quietly took the foot's job. But we still haven't answered the deepest question. Why? Why would evolution build an animal so relentlessly, obsessively good at going far on foot? What was it for? For that, we go to the Kalahari, and to the strangest hunt on Earth. For decades, an anthropologist named Louis Liebenberg lived and ran with the San people of southern Africa, some of the last humans to practice a technique that may be older than almost anything else we do. It's called persistence hunting, and it sounds at first like it shouldn't work. A hunter picks out an antelope. Not the slowest one. Just one. And then he simply follows it. He can't outrun it in a sprint. The antelope bolts and vanishes in seconds. But the hunter doesn't sprint. He jogs. He tracks. He reads the bent grass and the disturbed sand and finds the animal again, and pushes it into another run, and follows again. And again. Through the hottest part of the day, on purpose. Here's why it works, and why it could only ever work for a creature like you. The antelope is fast, but it cannot cool itself the way you can. It pants. It carries a thick coat. When it sprints in the midday heat, its body temperature climbs, and it has no way to dump that heat fast enough. You do. You are nearly hairless, and your skin is covered in millions of sweat glands, the most powerful cooling system of any large mammal alive. You can run and cool at the same time. The antelope cannot. So the hunter just keeps coming, mile after mile. The animal runs, overheats, slows, runs, overheats, slows, until hours later, it simply cannot run anymore. It stands trembling, its body cooking from the inside. And the hunter walks up and takes it. No bow needed. No spear thrown in anger. The weapon was distance itself. And notice what runs alongside the feet the whole time. A mind. To follow an animal you cannot see, the hunter has to read the faint story in the sand, the bent blade of grass, the depth of a hoof print, and from those scraps predict where a creature went and how tired it has become. Liebenberg argued that this act, building a chain of reasoning from tiny clues to an unseen conclusion, is one of the oldest forms of thinking we have. The endurance wasn't only in the legs, it was in the patience to keep reasoning, step after step, for hours. The body went far, and the mind went with it. Now put the barefoot back into that picture. 20 miles across burning ground in the heat, chasing an animal to the edge of its life. The thick sole that ignores the gravel. The arch returning energy at every step so the hunter doesn't burn out. The sweat pouring off skin that has no fur to trap it. The whole body, from the spring in the foot to the cooling of the skin, working as one machine with one purpose. Outlast it. This is the answer to the question we started with. Your ancestor could walk 20 miles without shoes, not because life was hard and made him hard, although it did. He could do it because that distance is the thing his entire body was designed to deliver. The 20 miles wasn't the challenge. The 20 miles was the whole point of the design. Let me be careful here too, because persistence hunting is a contested topic. Scientists argue about how common it actually was across human prehistory and how much of our evolution it directly drove versus simply walking and scavenging and gathering over long distances. That debate is real and ongoing, but the thing it points to is not. Whether through hunting or foraging or simply moving with the seasons, the deep truth holds. We are an endurance animal. We are the creature that wins by not stopping. And the foot, bare against the ground, is where that whole story touches the earth. So now come back to your own feet. The ones in the shoes by your door. When your arch aches, when your heel screams in the morning, when a doctor tells you your feet need more support, more cushioning, more correction, hold all of this in your mind. The plantar fasciitis that 1 in 5 of us will face is not your foot failing. It is often a foot that was never allowed to become strong. Muscles that went quiet inside a lifetime of support. A spring that was held flat for so long it forgot how to release. This is the pattern underneath so much of modern life. The problem is rarely that your body is defective. The problem is that your body is still calibrated for a world it almost never meets anymore. A foot built to read the ground, sealed inside a smooth, cushioned shell on flat, predictable floors, going nowhere far. You weren't built wrong. You were built for somewhere else. That doesn't mean throw your shoes in the trash tonight. Please don't. A foot that has been supported for decades has to be rebuilt slowly, gently, with patience. Ideally, with guidance. The point is not guilt. The point is understanding. To know that the strength your ancestors had is not some lost superpower. It's the default setting of the structure you're standing on right now. It's just been switched off, quietly, one comfortable step at a time. If picturing your ancestors crossing 20 miles of bare ground made you feel the floor under your feet a little differently, then stay with me. subscribe, and keep coming back, because every video here does the same thing this one did. It takes a part of you that modern life made you feel ashamed of or broken by and shows you the ancient logic still running underneath it. There's a version of you written into your own body all the way down to your feet. I'd like to keep showing it to you. So feel the ground under your feet right now. For almost the entire history of your kind, nothing stood between a human and the earth, and that wasn't deprivation. That was the design working exactly as intended. The distance was never the obstacle. The distance was the gift, and it's still down there, folded into 26 bones and a single waiting spring asking only to touch the ground again.